Eric, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Super excited to have you on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man, I'm going to first get my Mike Robertson fanboy props out because
I love it.
Since the early day of college, I think I read your stuff on T Nation, and obviously when you started the podcast, I have been listening to this podcast for a really long time. So just want to say grateful for everything you do to the industry, for the industry. You've helped me a lot as a coach from afar, so I just got to get my props out there.
Thanks, man.
And it's been awesome to get to know you in your favorite city. I don't think I've ever met a guy that loves Vegas more than you. So,
I love Vegas. Love it.
You're a huge Vegas guy, so it's great to see you out there every year. But yeah, about me, man, I'm 5'10", 190 pounds of dynamite. I originally grew up in California. I'm from California. I'm from the mecca of carjackings. Which is Modesto, California. My life motto is Kaizen, or continuous daily improvement. I got that tatted on. I don't know if you can cuss on the podcast. So I got it tatted on my body.
Yep.
I'm a big outdoors guy. I love to fish, love to hike. I believe in living, what we preach. So I try to be pretty dialed in on everything, nutrition to sleep, training, all that stuff, and optimistic. I'm an optimistic person. Never try to take myself too seriously. Hopefully that'll come across today, and always looking for the positive. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Dude, this is why we get along so well, right? Like, ever the optimist. Like, everything around me could be blowing up, and I'll be like, "No, we'll figure this out." To a fault sometimes, but
100%.
Okay, so talk to me. What led you to the world of physical preparation? Like, how did you get started in this space?
Yeah, man, I never know how far to go back with this question here, but what originally got me into this space, it was probably pretty vain. Like, I used to train in high school and just wanted to get shredded. But I just always had this, I think it was like a space, like the gym was like a space for me to kind of get comfortable with myself, get to know myself a little bit and push myself. And I just always enjoyed like the physical aspect of it. I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. I went to college for kinesiology I think I knew about like physical therapy at the time a little bit, like,
sure.
So that was maybe my original kind of intent, but just knew I wanted to be around something kinesiology related, health related. So went to school for that, but had no idea what I was going to do. And then I ended up working as a personal trainer and then getting around some people who introduced me to strength and conditioning. And once I got introduced, I remember going home, my freshman year it was my freshman year in college, and I Googled strength coach because I didn't know what it was. And literally strengthcoach.com pops up.
Yes.
And, you were on there. You might've responded to this thread. So you've changed my life as well. But I asked some questions about strength and conditioning. I read a bunch of stuff on the forum, and then I ended up kind of trying to ask about like, what's the educational route to become like a professional strength coach. So I kind of got all my information from there, and it was like a bunch of people were pushing Springfield College, Spirit, Mind, Body, baby. And, so that's where I ended up going. But I think you chimed in about Ball State, maybe on that one. We got to go to the archives for that, but either way, I started out it was for myself. I got into it just thinking, okay, this would be a cool profession. And then I just fell in love with the teaching aspect when I was kind of personal training and then starting to get into like athlete population training. I just really enjoyed that piece of it. So yeah, that's kind of my origin story in a very, very small nutshell there. But I did a bunch of internships. I ended up actually going to Springfield College, which is a long way from California, as you know. And that kind of got me into, I guess, a circle of people that really had a profound impact on me. Everybody from my classmates to my professors. Like, this is like Pat Davidson, Springfield College days. So he's one of my big mentors, and just exposed me to a world that I had no idea about. So, that sort of set me on a little bit of a path to kind of where I am today, for sure.
Yeah, that's so cool. I don't I don't think I knew you went to Springfield, because for the longest time, like, you would think, oh, somewhere local, right? Like IU or Purdue or Ball State, that's where we got all our interns from. The two schools that we got the most interns from was Springfield College and Buffalo. Like,
Buffalo. Nice.
literally, we got so many from those two schools. So that's really cool, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, we roll deep, man. Springfield rolls deep, you know. So
yes,
it's once I figured out, like, you know, that at the time, again, now there's more places out there, but again,
sure.
I date myself here. This is like 2013. At the time, it was like that was the place that had the biggest reputation for the industry, for sure. You know, just like reading the people that had went there, and it was like, damn, this is a laundry list of monsters. So
absolutely.
that was a place to be. But you know, hopefully those Springfield folk did a good job for you.
No, they did great. Okay, so last but not least, talk to me about where you're at now. What your day-to-day current gig looks like with the Memphis Grizz.
Yeah, my this is year 5, believe it or not, which is wild. This is going into year 5. I'm the head strength and conditioning coach here. I work with a really big team, as you know. There's, you know, our department is the performance department. So I'm responsible for the health and performance of you know, multiple of the players. And my day to day, just being a strength coach, man, just living in that dungeon downstairs. You know, just training guys on a day to day basis. And obviously, you know, being part of a big team, we're involved in sort of a lot of different little pieces here. But my sole responsibility is to you know, train the guys and be generally just be a strength coach. You know, I was in college for a long time, and I wore a lot of hats. When I'm here, right. I am a pure strength coach. I'm responsible for the, you know, the physical aspects of these guys' preparation.
I love it. So kind of my vision for this show is, like, literally we're going to start at the end of a year and just work our way forward, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of get the gamut and really give people an insider's view into how this looks for you guys, because I think a lot of people think they have the answers until they get into somebody like your shoes and they're like, oh, wow, there's a lot more here that I never thought of. So let's start at the end, and let's actually start with like an exit interview, right? Season just wrapped up, you know, the regular season, playoffs are done. What does your exit interview process look like with your athletes? And from that, do you give them like specific goals or maybe specific physical traits that you want them to work on during the off season?
Yeah, the exit interview is, I mean, there's pieces of it that are formal, but there's pieces of it that are pretty informal. I will say we do have an exit interview process where we sit down with each guy. I'll meet with each guy. It's usually like 15 minutes long or so.
Sure.
I say it's fairly informal because we spend so much time together that none of this stuff is really like, you know, there's nothing that like gets like held back until the end of the year sort of thing. Like we're chatting all the time. I mean, literally I see these guys like every single day for like 8 months straight. So a lot of the stuff is, you know, and I'm an open book with them. We talk about goals and priorities and things that, you know, they like and dislike. And I mean, I'm very adaptable to what these guys need and want. So it's informal in that sense, but you know, maybe some pieces are a little bit formal because you don't usually get an opportunity to like sit down in like a really focused, serious way. You know, there's something like more serious about like a formal meeting, if you will. And so I do try to get some feedback from them that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have shared, or you know, maybe this is just a space to share because it's like you're going into a new chapter of the year. So get some feedback from them if I can, and then really just talk about like the near future of like, okay, what are, you know, how much time off are we going to take at this, you know, this stretch? Where are we going to be? The off season is really, it's really long. And so guys aren't always going to be in market.
Yep.
So I just try to get a feel for the near future, and then, we'll readdress sort of the things that went well and things that didn't go well, and the things that, you know, maybe they struggled with physically, if they had any injuries, those types of things, and how we might strategize to protect against that stuff, and just kind of get a little bit of a set the tone for going into the off season. But yeah, like I said, most of this stuff is kind of, it's already been discussed at length because we're always talking about things throughout the year too.
So, okay, so you kind of have these informal meetings, maybe something a little bit more formal. Like from that, do you like go into the lab and like put your like program designer hat on and then like just craft out like this beautiful 4-month periodized program? Or like, what does that process look like for you? Like, how do you go in and you start to take all these pieces and put that together for them for their off season?
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll generally, the length of planning that goes into the off season is really dependent on the context of the situation. So I definitely wouldn't do like a full, I have my general like training blocks and thinking about like how these things are going to kind of, like going to build together.
Yeah.
But ultimately we'll take it in like shorter strides for sure. I think like getting a feel for what the length of time that they're going to be off is. Usually it's a couple weeks, and then as we kind of reacclimate to training, I'll kind of work on a program for them for that initial training block. That's fairly general depending on the context. So if a guy's going into summer league, and I don't know if you can hear somebody blowing leaves out there, it's super loud.
Of course.
All right. But if a guy is playing summer league, there's not really a long period of time there's not really a long training block preceding that. So there's kind of like a need to maybe hit the ground running a little bit there. But if a guy is like, a veteran that's not going to play early in the off season, then we can kind of stretch things out. So it's context dependent. Definitely don't. I'm not over here planning out like every day for the whole off season. That's a complete waste of time, but the top down planning process is definitely real. And so there'll be some constructs we'll put together, but, hopefully that's not too general. It's just really dependent on what the guy's going into.
No, I think probably what most of us do at this point, right? Like back in the day, you thought, oh yeah, I'll just string these 4 months together and it's going to go exactly like this. And now it's like, you really like lock in a program, right? You write one and the other 2 or 3 or 4, however many, they're kind of like just broadly sketched in your mind, right? Like this is what I'd kind of like to do here based on this person's KPIs and what we're chasing. These are things I kind of want to work on at this phase. But until you get to that phase and you see kind of what you've done before that, it's really hard to have something like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. It's just not that concrete.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think, there's like 2 structures to the planning. There's like this top down approach, which is like that big picture where you kind of start with that, macro, meso, micro, and build it all the way to a microcycle. And then there's this bottom up planning, which is sort of this agile process that is, I think, the most important component, to be honest with you. And so, yeah, it's Fantasyland to think in this space you're gonna run through something like for 4 months straight without without any agility to your plan. That's like it's complete nonsense. So yeah, it's you take it little pieces at a time, and you're going to be a lot better off.
Absolutely. Okay, so you and I both know that it's hard to get a pro athlete to stay in any one place for an off season, right? Unless they're in like a hot spot like LA, Miami, New York City. They're all over, right? They're in Memphis, they're in Vegas, they're in Memphis, they're in LA. Like they're all over. And as such, I'm sure there's a lot of instances where you would love to do all of the training for these guys and it's seamless and cohesive, but that's just not realistic either. So you got to interact and you got to integrate with private S&C coaches. And you and I have had this discussion, so I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. In a best case scenario, how does that relationship look? Like, how do you interact with private S&C coaches to get the best result for the athlete?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest with you, to your first point, like I actually agree that some of these guys should get out of market for a bit. Like I'm in favor of that. The one caveat I have is that guys stay put for a period of time, because the piece of like them jumping around and working with this person in 1 week and then that person another week, it's generally it's challenging to sort of get into your groove. So, but yeah, that's a great question in terms of what does that relationship look like? I mean, to be honest with you, it looks like 2 really good friends, like that's what it looks like. It's like 2 people that have, 2 good friends that have similar goals for somebody, because it's always about the player. And, so my goal in those situations is to really just get to know the individual that's working with the player and really just get as aligned as we can with, sort of how we're going to be able to best support that player, and a lot of these times, like I have personal experience with one of my athletes who has a trainer that he's worked with for maybe it's 5-6 years now, maybe more than that, 5-6 years, who's worked with that player more than I have. That trainer's worked with that player way more than I have, has a relationship that stretches further back than me. So if anything, I could probably learn a lot from them,
Sure.
And so it's really just kind of establishing some common ground and realizing again that it's not about my way or their way. It's literally about like what's going to best help this player. And I think keeping that front of mind is always the most important thing. And then, I won't pretend that like my way is the best way to do something. I mean, we've been in this industry long enough. There's a lot of different situations that athletes can train in and be really successful and be
Sure.
healthy and build robustness. So I'm certainly not going to try to interject my full philosophy on somebody and say, hey, this is what you should do. But we will talk about some of the KPIs that we have. We'll talk about some of the way that player handled the environment, because there is no replicating an 82 game NBA season, So I'll definitely learn some things about how this individual handles the environment in terms of what are the things that get sore, what are the things that hurt, what are the injuries that they had. All that stuff is kind of shared in a way of like, how can we protect against these things in future cases? And so we'll talk a lot about that. And yeah, we'll just try to establish some common ground. And then I try to get pretty specific with things. So sharing videos, just sharing very specific messages about, the program that the individual's been on, and yeah, just different things like that. But ultimately, it's just about building. I mean, it's so cliche here, but building a really strong relationship with that trainer and just keeping that player front of mind at all times.
Yeah, I love that. And there's really two things I wanted to note here. Number one, you talked about staying in one place for a while. I think that's true because I have a lot of friends and colleagues in the skill development side too that I've cultivated over the years. And I think they would say the same thing, right? Like if you're going from city to city every week, that means you probably have a different strength coach every week and a different skill development guy. And so if everybody has their own interpretation of what you need, right? Like in our world, one guy says you need more plyometrics, and the next guy says, no, you just got to get strong. And then the third guy says, no, you just need to work on your mobility. It's like you just end up spinning your wheels and you make zero progress.
Yeah.
Same thing on the skill development side, right? Like one guy's like, oh, no, you got to work on your finishing. No, you got to work on your shot, Like there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
100%.
Right?
Yeah,
so
100%.
I think like a unified vision is important. And then I would just say this, like one thing that I've always respected about you guys and the other kind of coaches that I've interacted with throughout the league is the transparency. Because as a private S&C coach, when you are willing to send me, hey, this is this guy, these are the issues that we've had, these are the scores, these are the metrics we want to test or see improved, it makes my program design process so easy because I know exactly what you guys want to see when you get him back. And I think that goes the other way too. Because again, you and I have talked about this. If you're a private strength coach and you're working with a high-level athlete, please actually write programs, document what you're doing, write down like improvements in strength, force plate testing, whatever you're doing, so that when you send them back, you can show, hey, look, this is what we did this offseason, and then it's seamless on your guys' end as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think sharing programs is like just step one, it's like you should be able to like share your program. Like here's like literally, because I struggle with vagueness when it comes to some of this stuff. Like if we talk about an athlete's like lift or something, like I actually want to know like what were the set and rep schemes, what were the progression, what was the load this individual is doing. Like things like that are very important when you actually like, I don't know, when you get down to the brass tacks of like training an individual. So I think sharing that information freely is like at least step one, that should just be kind of like the expectation. And then it hopefully can push beyond that where you can get into the weeds on maybe the deeper things. But Yeah, I hope that's more frequent. I've had good experiences, to be honest, so maybe I'm just spoiled. Like working with you in the off, like in some of the off season stuff, and some of the other trainers that I've worked with in the private sectors have been awesome. So maybe I'm
That's
just
great.
spoiled.
Yeah, that could be. That could be. Because I've heard some horror stories where somebody's like, "Hey, can you send me your programs?" And they're like, "Oh, I just kind of do what I feel like doing that day." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Like that's embarrassing for me to think that there's people like in my situation that don't write programs. Like
Yeah,
you would
that's
think
wild.
that's base level.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
that's
It's
wild.
crazy. Okay. So this next question should be pretty top of mind, especially since preseason is right around the corner. So let's say you've got a new or a returning athlete coming in. I'd love to
Hmm.
hear more about your intake or your evaluation process and what that looks like as their strength coach.
Yeah, definitely. This is definitely front of mind because this is the period of the year that we're in right now. So when an athlete returns, there'll be an on ramp period where generally you're in touch with these guys, but you give them space. So I don't know exactly what their day to day is. So we'll chat a little bit about some of their most recent like training history and just get a feel for what sort of things they've been doing like that week or weeks prior, that sort of thing. And then I just try to really kind of this is the period where I have a plan for sure, and there's some things that like we've obviously worked on, especially if it's a returning player. And I'll just kind of have my general plan, but it's very agile the first week or two to kind of acclimate them because generally these guys know this is what I need to do to get myself into ready for training camp, into kind of playing shape and that sort of thing. So it's pretty agile, but there'll be a general like training plan that's based on sort of their menu of things that they've done in the past. If it's a new player, a little bit of a different scenario. Sometimes you're just kind of getting a feel for um, what what they like to do, what they don't like to do, sort of what their initial goals are, and then kind of we'll always kind of evaluate maybe some of the we'll evaluate some of the baseline measures that are pretty important that we generally will be looking at regardless. So some of our big measure KPIs, whether that's some of our isokinetic stuff on the humac or on the new leg press we got, or some force plate testing stuff. So there's some things there that we'll definitely look at to establish some baseline. And that maybe gives us a little bit of a picture as to like where this individual is in relation to where they've been in the past, or where they are if they're new in relation to the other players on the team, that sort of thing. So we'll do some of our testing, but we won't do that like day one or anything. We'll kind of ease that into the mix.
Yes.
Nobody likes to come in and just be a lab, like a lab
A
a
lab
lab
rat
rat,
day one.
yeah, and jump into that. So it's really just about like onboarding them into sort of the training, and we do schedule out like everything that goes down during this period. So there's days that guys are playing right now. There's days that guys are just having individual days, that sort of thing. So we'll kind of acclimate guys into that depending on when they come back during this period of time. But again, hopefully that's not too broad of an answer, but that's ultimately kind of what it looks like. It's pretty fluid in terms of what they've recently been doing, and sort of if they're dealing with anything when they come in at this period of time, we'll account for that too. So
For sure. No, it's really interesting. And, I have heard some of my guys that are like, yeah, I got there day one, like off the plane, and they like were putting me on force plates and like testing all that. And I'm like, okay.
yeah,
I mean, like, look, everybody's entitled to do whatever they want or whatever they deem is best. But that's always kind of been my process too, is like, look, nobody wants to come in day one and be evaluated. I remember this is kind of funny. I'll make this short. But the first NBA player I ever get is Roy Hibbert, right? And Roy's just a huge human being anyways. He's like 7'2". And I just remember the first week, he's like, look, I've taken the last 3 weeks off. All I've done is sit around my house, eat creme brulee waffles and Cheesecake Factory. He's
oh
like,
my
we're not
God, the
getting...
dream.
I know, right? He's like, I'm not doing any performance testing. I'm not getting on a scale. I'm not doing body comp for a couple weeks. And I was like, okay, that's fair. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
like that really, for being my first person, I was like, okay, I get it. Like he hasn't done anything. Like let's ramp up for a little bit and
Yeah.
then we can get those performance numbers.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
it'll be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. It'll be there. And like, and I know you and I jive on this. Like every session can be an evaluation, you know? So
Yeah.
like, obviously if, you know, we just had a player come back this week who's been off for a little bit, and it's like, okay, we're going to do the same, you know, we're going to do this basic session of these exercises that you've done in the past. I know what you've done in the past.
Yep.
And it gives me a little bit of a feel for, you know, how hard are they straining to, you know, hit these weights that they've done easily in the past, that sort of thing. And really like you can get a good idea and good feel for, I mean, we know if somebody's been training, you can get a good feel for that pretty quickly. You know, if somebody hasn't been training, that's also, pretty evident as well. So ultimately it's like you can treat that session clearly as an evaluation without having to, again, go through, maybe more formal testing stuff throwing them on Humax and doing maybe more like direct testing that's very very formal, that sort of thing. So it's just you let them gear up, you know, give them some time.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I also just like that idea of, again, if you've worked with somebody for a while, it doesn't always have to be like this formal, okay, we're going to go do your squat jump and your counter, you know, like you don't have to do all that. Like you said, you can just kind of, okay, let me watch you jump on this box.
Mm-hmm.
Let me watch you do this squat or this trap bar deadlift. And you're like, okay, this person's about where I think they should be, or we may have a little bit of work to do to ramp them back up and get them where we want them.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so talk to me about planning and periodization in season, because you and I both know the internet experts have all the secrets, they have all the answers, and they will gladly tell us why all the things that, you know, those of us that write in-season programs are doing wrong. But beyond them, I'd love to hear how you guys attack planning and programming for, you know, what amounts to a 6, 7, 8 month, 90 to 100 game plus season.
Mm-hmm. This is such a monster of a topic, but it's something that I think about all the time, obviously, and I'm very heavily involved in trying to figure out how to best plan for this period of time. But you know, when I think about like the in-season periodization, it's the longest, it's the most consistent, the most unbroken training block of the year, to be honest with you. You know, and so that provides maybe some advantages to think about it that way, of just like, okay, there's this really long period of time that I'm definitely going to be with these individuals the entire time. So, you know, I think looking at it that way, first and foremost, allows us to maybe kind of like step back and just be like, okay, there's a nice opportunity in front of us here to really, you know, make some improvements if we're real strategic with our approach. But periodization in general, the way I think about it is we're breaking it into some of the like organization of the training pieces, and then the kind of planning based on like these different time scale pieces. And if you look at like a 6, 7, 8 month block, that's too big of a time to really plan effectively. You kind of have to break it up, you know? And so the typical language that we use in strength conditioning is the macro, the meso, and the micro cycles, you know? And so the first thing I'll do is I'll take this monster of a time frame and I'll just try to like put it into these more manageable chunks, you know? And so if I think about like what this macro cycle is, the macro cycle is the whole period. It's the whole 6, 7, 8 months in season. And then, you know, the mesocycle, what we'll do is we'll chunk it into quarters of the year. And so those quarters end up being about, they're 20 game blocks, you know, about 20 game blocks. So if you take a 82 game season, then you have, you know, roughly 20 games in each quarter there. So there's 4 quarters to the year. And those are kind of what I would just consider the mesocycles, you know, that sort of medium term plan there. And fortunately for us, those are run about every 6 weeks or so. Like that's about 6 to 8 weeks. Sorry. Yeah, a little longer, 6 to 8 weeks there. And so if you think about like planning and training, that's a general period of time that we like to think about, like writing, you know, planning out these sort of sequential programs. So that helps there. And those quarters also help to kind of anchor some of our evaluations, you know. So if we're looking at these sort of KPIs that we want to keep a good eye on and make sure that we always have a good, recent dashboard of some of these important metrics, then we have a little bit of we have that period of time where we can start to, we can evaluate at least once or twice during that quarter, each quarter. So we'll look at things there. And then the microcycles kind of break into the 2-week blocks, and that's sort of those just the 2-week block is it allows me to be a little more agile. So that's why I used to do a week-long microcycle. Now I've stretched that out. It's usually about a 14-day microcycle. So that's sort of like how you break down the time frame, or how I'm thinking about breaking down like the time scales, because that's really like the first step of periodization. And I think part of that is like just agreeing upon these time scales with other groups, so like our sports medicine, like our whole sports medicine staff is thinking about these time scales the same. And that's really helpful because, it's not just my, testing and evaluations and my programming. It's about there's a lot of pieces to this, to this process. So I think making sure that we're all kind of on the same page when we define sort of these time scales, I think is like step one. And then as far as like the organization of the training, that's the stuff that we like to get into when we start thinking about things. And so, so when I think about that, it's like, what are the biomotor qualities that we're trying to work on? How do we break down these components within a program? So then we have things like, from a biomotor quality standpoint, we have things like absolute strength, we have reactive strength, we have speed strength, we have, strength endurance. There's these different qualities that we know are going to be important to develop and retain. And then, how do we break down those into smaller manageable chunks? So what are we working on? Is it the GPP blocks? Is it the SPP blocks? Is it the sport specific stuff? So there's kind of like different categories there that I'm thinking about, and then it's really just kind of whittling that down to like the individual training days, and so there's sort of like different types of training days that, that we'll put together, and I just call them high, moderate, and low, pretty simple. So we have that aspect of it. And then really it's really building out the training menu. What does the training menu consist of? I don't try to reinvent the wheel here. So it's like, what are the patterns that we're looking at? So for each one of those sort of biomotor qualities, what patterns do we have that we're going to train? And it's your typical stuff. It's the Ian King, Mike Boyle. You have your heavy implement power, light implement power. You have your knee dominant, hip dominant, all that stuff. And so I kind of build out this training menu based on this individual's, the anthropometrics, the mobility restrictions, that sort of thing. And you get real specific. It's like selecting the actual exercises that you're going to utilize, that sort of thing. Selecting some of the goals for those each one of those exercises, and then it's about kind of plugging those into those different training days, and then starting to kind of build out those little chunks of training. So it's like when we talk about like the meso structure, it's like, all right, we have this 6 to 8 week block that we're going to sort of like have a pretty good top-down plan for, but then it's really just getting specific for like 2-week blocks at a time. And it's like, okay, I look at these 2 weeks in front of me, and sort of here's how I'm gonna plan those, and then here's the backup plan for that, because this never goes as planned. So it's like, we're trying to kind of work on training in these 2-week little sprints here. So that's sort of how I do it. I've done it differently, in the past, but certainly that's how I'm trying to think about it. And some of the other pieces, like I just had a call with Pac. I don't know if you know Pac, but he's a guy who's done his PhD on minimal effective training dose. And so that topic's really important in this environment, because I really am you're trying to figure out, what's the most strategic dosage that I can put here, put in their training plan over this period of time while they have all these other stressors to retain some of these qualities or develop some of these qualities. And so I just want to give him a shout out, because I talked to him for a little while last week about about this topic, because it's always important to try to figure out, what's the optimal dosage to build some of these biomotor qualities and to retain some of these qualities as all this other competing stressors are happening. So trying to best figure that stuff out. But yeah, so anyway, taking this big long period of time, chunking it into these time scales, organizing the training in a way that makes sense, and then really getting specific towards what the menu of that individual is, and then real specific about, what are the rate limiters, or, what are the constraints to the development of these qualities, and then just trying to really chip away at that. That's really what it comes down to. And just, and then being ready to be super, super agile, because,
right.
I will never put my agenda first, because ultimately, like, we do deliver a stress here, right? So an 82 game season, the travel, the mental, the cognitive stress, the physical stress of the game, it's a lot. So certainly, there are days where we punt it. It's like, oh, not today, punt it to the next, and then we move on. But it's I found that structure at least to be very, very useful in being able to sort of like kind of take this monster of a time frame, break it into the manageable blocks, and actually stay consistent with some training and get these programs like really dialed in. So that's kind of, I guess, big picture, maybe how I'm thinking about it. But but it's front of mind right now, because that's sort of the stage of the year we're in right now, is like kind of planning this stuff out.
Sure. And then I guess as a follow-up to that, because like you mentioned, minimum effective dose, that's really important, because you got some guys that are going to be playing 36, 37, 38 minutes. You got your rotation guys that are maybe 18 to 20 to 25. And then you got your guys that, unless somebody's injured, they're kind of on the bench, next to you. So how does that scale, or how does that impact what you're trying to do as a strength coach? With those other guys, are you trying to develop more and build more? Or, with your starters, are you trying to just like manage stress more? Like, how does that look for you guys? How do you bucket that out?
That's a great question. I think our it definitely is going to be catered to what, what sort of bucket that player is in. If they're a high minute player, if they're a low minute player, if they're a rotation player, if they're somebody who's not in the rotation, you're definitely going to have some differences there. One of the things I think we do a great job of is keeping consistent playing in our entire roster from 1 to 17. So they're like, if, for instance, if a guy's out of a rotation, they're in a play group that is getting live play for usually a minimum of like 40 minutes a week, of live play. So, and those are like play groups that occur on game days, so that we can consolidate the stress, and we can also deliver, some live play, because far too often, I think you'll see if a player does, go down and is now out of rotation, is injured, and somebody has to step in, it's very difficult to replicate the demands of the game. We can do all the running we want, we can do all the plyos we want, we can do all the, the lifting we want, but I mean, there's really nothing like the actual game, and the intensity of the game. Even some of these like play groups are very difficult to replicate, even though they're playing live, they're playing 5-on-5. It's just very difficult to replicate that, and the demands that do occur when they actually step in the NBA on an NBA court. So it helped. That process does help, though, because regardless of where that player falls on that sort of continuum of how much they're playing, or if they're in and out of rotation, it's like they are on generally a similar plan. The players that are not playing as much will probably have more training opportunities with me for sure. And players that are, heavy minute in rotation are not going to have as many opportunities. And then as far as like the dosage wise, I think a lot of, you look into all this stuff. Most training is it's dose dependent. It's like, so it's like the intensity is sort of this, this thing that we got to make sure we hit. And then it's like, how much do we want to turn the dial up or down depending on how much they actually need to retain or develop some of these qualities that we're after. And so ultimately it's like with a high minute player, you're just going to turn that dial down a little bit. And it really doesn't require much. This is one of the things I've learned, certainly when we talk about minimal effective dose, is like it isn't to retain some of these like qualities, these biomotor abilities. It doesn't take much training, and it's very difficult for our brains to process how little it probably takes as strength coaches. But we're talking like, if you look at some of, PAC's research, we're talking like potentially 1 to 2 sets, like heavy sets a week, to retain like max strength. Yeah. Very, very, very minimal dose, and so it doesn't, so it's ultimately about just determining where that player is on that sort of continuum. And then again, just making sure that you're turning that dial up or down as appropriately as you can. And so it does get a little individual there, but most guys are generally on the same kind of cadence.
Yeah, no, I love that. And when I was in soccer, and especially working with the Indy 11, like that was something we always tried to do the best possible job of, is keeping everybody in the same rhythm, right? Like you said, your playing groups are going to play on game days, right? So everybody's fatigued at the same time or sore at the same time. Like that kind of biorhythms are the same across everybody, because one of the issues we would have is, okay, somebody doesn't play a lot, and now on Sunday, now you've got a group that's playing, right? And they're going at each other, and it's an intense session. Well, now the Saturday group, is different than the Sunday group, and now everybody's rhythms are off. So I love that. It's just, it makes things way harder to manage, and then it's hard to plan the whole rest of your week, right? So like, when do certain guys lift? What are going to be our intense training days? And obviously soccer is a different rhythm because you generally got a 7-day training week in between games. But yeah, I love that you guys are keeping all that kind of lined up.
And it's best for the player too. I mean, they have to get these touches in. I mean, it's like there's, you can only do so much skill work, and you got to be able to put the whole thing together. And so I think it's definitely best for the player as well, and I think that's kind of where it always starts. And then it's like, okay, but that also makes everybody else's life a little easier as well, because you have a little bit more of a ability to kind of structure and plan things.
Yeah. Okay. So in a perfect world, no one ever gets injured.
Yep.
Every guy plays 82 games, but unfortunately, you and I both know that rarely, if ever, happens, right? Things come up, somebody bangs knees, whatever. So this is where the integration comes into play, right? Somebody gets injured. How does that collaboration process look for you guys? Like, how do your ATs, your PTs, your SNCs, how does everybody come together to get an athlete back to 100%?
Yeah, I would say, this is Fantasyland again, but I love living here. So the way that the process works for us is the PTs are going to take the lead on that. I think they're going to take the lead on, doing the differential and determining what the injury is, what the severity of that injury is. And we have, such high level PTs. I know, some of these guys personally, guys and gals personally, but the PTs that we have are just incredible. And so they'll do kind of the lead work of, like, again, doing that differential, determining severity, planning things out as far as like what's a projected return. And so that's something that it's a really hard job, to be honest, but like projecting a return very early in the process, depending on the severity of the injury, obviously, but projecting a return very early in the process, and then, sort of delineating responsibilities appropriately. I think we have really dynamic people on our staff. And we've worked together for a long time now. So we've kind of figured out sort of like our rhythms in terms of, who's responsible for what, because as we know, when it comes to especially like PT and strength coach, there can be like this very gray middle that, everybody gets uncomfortable with. But I think ultimately it's like, we sort of have, again, you kind of have this like structure in this period of time where this person's going to have to build and develop, back into recovering from the injury, and then develop back into being able to play. And it's just about delineating the responsibilities accordingly. So early on in the process, that could be as simple as like, I literally am only taking the things that have zero impact on the particular injury, or it could be a little bit of a mix there, where there's certain things that I'm responsible for, and certain things that the PT is going to handle with this individual. So it's such a vague answer, but like we just have very dynamic people on our staff that have really, have a lot of skill sets, and there's carryover in those skill sets, meaning like there's certain things that I could certainly do, that one of our PTs can do. And I think we've worked together long enough now where it just becomes pretty simple. Like I really don't care what I do or don't do, what I'm responsible and I'm not responsible for, as long as it's, again, just what's best for the player. And that's going to be something that, that's going to help them, be healthy and return as quickly as possible. So I certainly will delineate all responsibility, as long as it's what's best for that person. So it depends on the injury and the situation, but we're pretty fluid with where those lines are drawn, if you will. And then, when those things sort of get passed back and forth, because what you mostly deal with, if we really boil it down, you get ego aside, what you mostly deal with is logistics. You deal with I don't have the time to do everything with this person, right. And neither does the PT. The PT doesn't have the time. So it's you're really dealing with a logistical problem more than anything else, And so I think as far as who's responsible for what, it's what are the logistical constraints and, what's best for the player. And then you just divvy it up that way and you go from there. So it's there's definitely a lot of collaboration. And again, in these environments, you're talking every day, you're getting very specific, and every day is very specific. Here's exactly what they're going to do. And so these are things that are always evolving and fluid, but certainly I think that the years that we've had together have really made that process a lot smoother for sure.
Yeah. I kind of think of it like this. If each of you is a circle, right? Like your PT is a circle and your strength coach is a circle and your sports scientist or your skill development guy, if they're all these different circles, right? It behooves each of you to overlap into the other person's area.
Exactly.
Right? So if you're like the strength guy that never leaves the weight room and you have no clue what the PT is going to do or what the skill development person's going to do, it's very hard for you to be successful.
Yeah.
Right? Or to give the athlete the best chance for success versus, hey, if I go and I'm going to hang out with this PT for a little while and figure out what are they chasing, what's their line of thinking, what's their methodology, now your circle starts to grow into theirs, right? And it's not because you're trying to take their space. It's just no, I want to have a better understanding of what it is that you do.
Yeah.
And so as a coach, the more you can kind of widen your circle to just better understand the other people that you interact with, I think it ultimately makes you way more powerful and way better at what you do, but ultimately it gets the athlete a better end result as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really good way to put it. It's just sort of understanding, and the longer you're around people, the more this gets a lot easier, obviously, and so,
for sure.
And we have the luxury, I have the luxury of going in and I can watch training sessions or watch their PT sessions a lot of times, actually be there for them. And if not, there's again, these conversations are happening and, we have Slack, which is our medium of communication that is, we have a process of how we discuss things. And so it's about expanding your circle and making sure you're just doing what's best.
Absolutely. Okay, my guy, I know you've listened to the show, so it's big question time. If you could alter the space-time continuum and give young Eric Schmitt one piece of advice, what would it be?
Man, I actually didn't prepare for this question, but I have heard the podcast enough. And I mean, I think the one thing I would say is slow down. Just slow yourself down a little bit. I think as much as I'm eager to learn and grow and develop, it's I feel like at times early in my career, I probably tried to learn too fast, if you will.
Yep.
And the faster you learn something, the easier it is to forget it. And, I think if you've been in this industry long enough, you're going to forget a lot of stuff, that you think you knew. And so I think it's just slow down and take your time in trying to actually master some of these topics or build enough of a foundation to really have a robust understanding of some of these topics. That's the one piece of advice. But I always go back to what I'm thinking of saying was nothing, because I don't think my younger self is is ready to receive that information.
Right.
But ultimately, yeah, maybe if that could get through to, the young Schmitt, then that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a pretty common answer. Be patient, slow down. Like the right things will happen if you're doing the right things to get yourself there, right?
I think so. I really do.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a reason I didn't put your lightning round questions in the initial questions, because I wanted this to just be 100% spontaneous.
God, I love that.
Okay. All right, here we go. So I got 5 questions.
Boom.
Number 1, best gym in Vegas. Go.
Come on, man. No question. This is Dragon's Lair, baby. Dragon's Lair.
Let's go.
It's not even Flex Lewis's gym. The place is painted all black with, red dragons all over the place. It's got every piece of equipment you could ever imagine. It's a no-brainer. And if you haven't been there and you've been to Vegas, shame on you. Go to Dragon's Lair. It's the best.
Sad. I thought you were going to say the Hilton or whatever we were at this summer. Okay. All right. Dragon's Lair. Number 2, worst part about Summer League.
Oof. Vegas. All of it, dude. Yeah. I mean, the wildest thing about Summer League is, worst part. Okay. It's Vegas, man. It's a wild place to try to work, right? So
yes,
I'll be coming down the elevator at 6 a.m. to just, hit my Starbucks run. And there's just people that are just banged up on the elevator, just getting through a night of partying. You walk out to the main floor. People are smoking stogies, sitting at the tables. It's dude, it's 6 a.m. Still gambling. I'm just gambling. It's just Vegas is so fascinating to me. But all of it, man. It's a wild place. It's a wild place to try to work, to try to be productive.
That's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Because I obviously see you out there, and it's it's a business trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're going out, our idea of going out is we're going to go to dinner or Top Golf for the event and have a couple drinks, and then we're in bed. It's no. Every morning when I was there this year, I was up at 7, right? I'm downstairs having breakfast. These dudes are literally coming in every night at 7 eating breakfast. I'm how different are our days?
Oh my gosh.
Right? I'm starting my day bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. These guys are just wrapping it up, ready to go to bed. I'm they have to feel awful.
Oh my gosh.
They've got to feel awful.
I think about it all the time. I'm we're living in a parallel universe right now, me and this guy.
Yes.
So it's a good time.
Okay, number 3. What are you most excited about learning right now? I know you're always learning stuff. What are you most excited about right now? Nerding out on?
Gosh, man, good question. I would say I'm always most interested in bioenergetics. Always.
Okay.
It's just, for whatever reason, it just excites me to try to learn about just that topic in general. So, and it's not even just conditioning per se, but just I think it's bioenergetics. The whole thing is involved in everything that we do. So I'm always when I find myself just trying to learn something, outside of what specific problems are in front of me. It's typically bioenergetic related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anything specific that you're reading, watching, or just as a whole, you're just reading textbooks? Yeah.
Currently I'm reading, Evan Pycon's new book that he wrote on, I'm not sure if you know who he is, but he's this dude's a monster, man. He's really, really good physiology, for sure. He has he works for a company called Nox.
Okay.
And Nox is I don't know if you're familiar with Moxie, but Moxie is muscle oxygen sensor. Nox is another, it's a muscle oxygen sensor, but it also measures nitric oxide levels. And so there's kind of a manual that he's written as part of kind of getting you up to speed with some of the underlying physiology of the technology. And so I'm reading that right now, and that's I'm always fascinated by that. But it's another potential piece of technology that I think that probably has a lot of value in kind of looking under the hood at some of these sort of these internal indicators of physiological performance. And so I think that's something I'm reading right now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. I've heard of him, but I've not read his book, so that sounds intriguing.
it's like I think it's a manual, but I mean, like, yeah, you'd be, I could share it with you. It's a free resource he provides, but it's good, man. I mean, it's very, very good. Yeah, very good. So
I love to nerd out, man. You know that.
Me and you both. One nerd to another.
Yes,
you know.
That's right. Okay, number 4. The best thing you did this off season was.
Ooh. Okay. I mean, I'm going to go personal here. I went to visit my grandpa's hometown in France, and that was above and beyond the best thing I did this off season. Yeah. So spent a lot of good time with family out in France, and had some really good times out there. He grew up in the Vosges Mountains, which is the border of France and Germany, in like this small little village. So I finally got to go see where he where the Schmitt lineage not began, obviously, but like, so my grandpa came over from France, and he was the one that kind of immigrated here and kind of got us started, and so that was cool.
I just saw a lot of food pictures from that trip.
Oh my gosh.
Food looked amazing.
That's my favorite thing, man, is food. So you're going to get a lot of that on the gram if you're following me. Not a lot of training, a lot of food.
Yeah. Unless you're in Dragon's Lair.
Dragon's
Lair,
no
plus
question.
Food.
Oh my gosh, no question. Yeah, but great food over there. I mean, obviously they're known for food.
Yes.
But we ate well.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, it looked so good. Okay. Last but not least, number 4. What's next for E. Schmitt?
Dominating this year, man. Just trying to be a little bit better this year. Hoping to contribute, to this organization, and hopefully contribute to, a little piece of success that we'll have this year. That's kind of what's next. It's tough to think about anything else, to be honest. That's what's in front of me is hopefully, just contributing to the success of this team, and hopefully have a great year.
Yeah, you got to put the blinders on now, man. It's about to be go time.
Oh, it's time. Yeah.
When does training camp start? October 3rd?
Yes, October 2nd, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. October. So we're here. We're here now.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, Schmitty, man, this was so awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so grateful that you could do this because, you're my boy. So where can my listeners find out more about you and anything that you're working on?
Well, the gram, I guess, because that's my only social media outlet, although shamelessly I don't really post much on there, but I'll do better for the people if they need it, but basically there is probably the easiest place. Other than that, hit me up personally and we can chat, but that's about it.
I love it. Well, Schmitty, man, thanks again for coming on, brother. This was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I honestly appreciate it.